Thank you very much to everyone. Bruno de Florence indeed. I'm a musicologist. I'm French but based in the UK, which is quite a wonderful country. And I'm a graduate from Goldsmith College of Music, where I did my studies in musicology. And last year, I published a book in France called precisely Musique, Semiotic et Pulsion, pulsion being the drive. And what my lecture, my presentation is about is framing a semiotics approach to what I call the musical fact or the musical act, depending on my mood. Why a semiotic approach in music? Well, if you've ever seen a score, which are music instructions, this is a score, and very obviously these are sounds, whether we consider the written sign or the sounds they're supposed to represent. So we are definitely, therefore, justified in trying to build a semiotic approach to music. But what kind of semiotic? A semiotic which will allow us to talk about music as a semiotic system, another form of thinking, and perhaps very surprisingly, a dream. And for that I shall use the semiotic systems of Sigmund Freud, yes, good old Freud, but I won't be talking about sex, Lacan and Peirce, and Jacques Lacan. Let's start with the semiotics of Sigmund Freud. Freud tells us to consider consciousness as a quality. Quality, not an essence, a quality of a psychic in which other qualities may be present or absent. And that is a very extremely important point, which I have to insist upon. Consciousness as quality, not an essence. And in a famous book, Freud talked about the division of the psychical into what is conscious and what is unconscious, as being the fundamental premise of psychoanalysis. And therefore we think of as qualities, the quality of something being conscious that is present to our awareness, and the quality of something being unconscious that is not present in our awareness, but nevertheless existing and having an effect. And this is Freud's representation of a mental apparatus, of a psyche. He describes them as places, but we could equally think of them as qualities. First place is where all the stimuli, what Freud called the mnemonic residues, what nowadays we call signifiers, enter the psychic apparatus, the conscious part of the psychic apparatus where those elements are readily available. There is then a locality, a place, which he calls preconscious, where those elements of stimuli are available, but with some effort. What that means is that when, as I'm speaking right now, I have all the words available to me, but they are not permanently, all of them, with the words that we'll be using for this presentation, they are not present in my consciousness all the time. And that is what Freud calls the preconscious. And then this third place, which he calls the unconscious, whereby those elements, those stimuli, are not readily available. Why? Because there is a kind of bar or border which stops those elements becoming conscious, and that he calls the censorship. Yet there is a way for those elements to actually become conscious, to acquire the quality of becoming conscious, or to travel to that place called consciousness. And he exposes this work in his, what he considers his best work, the Traumdeutung, which means the interpretation of dreams. And I'll draw your attention to the titles of chapter 6 and chapter 7, the dream work and the psychology of the dream process. The dream, therefore, in Freud's view, is not something which just happens to you. It is the result of a work, a physical work. It is the result of a process. And there are two mechanisms by which unconscious elements can actually become conscious. The first one is what he calls condensation. Condensation is simply the superimposition of elements. Let's take, for instance, this very funny sentence. Old people tend to fall into their anecdotage. This is a word which does not exist in the English language, but which is the result of a superimposition. The superimposition of anecdote, of dotage, and old age. And that's what the phenomenon of condensation is about. From a particular thought process, which was unconscious, come another thought process, which has become conscious, but in order to cross the censorship, it had to disguise itself in the guise of this anecdotage word. The second mechanism is what Freud called displacement, whereby one thing replaces another which corresponds to it. In this example, we have an image of a sovereign, but we could equally replace it by an image of a crown, and it would still denote the same object. So from being unconscious, from disguising themselves through these two mechanisms of condensation and displacement, thought processes can actually become conscious. To summarize, Freud's semiotics, since it acts on discrete elements, we are justified in calling it semiotics, is a dynamic process of condensation and displacement. What is unconscious was once conscious. What is unconscious can be made conscious, but it is not under voluntary control. We have here no will to power, or no power to will. And it is actually under the influence of something which Freud calls the drive. And the drive is a kind of force which is relentless and which pressures those elements into trying to become conscious. Therefore, Freud concludes that a dream is an other form of thinking. We will look now at the semiotics of Charles Sanders Peirce, American chap from the end of the 19th century who was friends with William James. He was a mathematician and a logician, and what he was concerned with was the internal logic of what we say. And for that, he elaborated a sign. Now, on the left, you have the traditional sign of Saussure, who is credited as being the father of linguistics and semiotics, whereby you have a signified attached to a signifier. A signifier is what we use to actually denote the signified, such as a word, and the signified is the concept. Signified and signifier are tied together, hence the circle which encapsulates them. However, Peirce, independently of de Saussure, gives us a three-element sign.